Yeah. Hello and welcome to the second international debate held by myPolitics. My name is Łukasz Kośmierczak and I'm the host of today's discussion. I'm joined by representatives of several youth organizations from across Europe, whom now I would like to introduce. Kasper Langelud Jakobsen from Danish Radikal Ungdom. Hello, Kasper.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
Piros Fievos from the youth of Syriza from Greece. I'm sorry for my pronunciation.
It's fine. It's diverse. Thank you very much. I welcome the opportunity.
Annette Bike from Vienotības Jaunatnes organizācija from Latvia.
Thank you for having me.
And Oskar Urban-Zając from Federacja Młodych Socjaldemokratów from Poland.
Welcome everybody, like Wojciech Olejniczak.
Wojciech Olejniczak, yeah, it's very famous. Firstly, I would like to remind you the rules of the debate. The debate will consist of 6 sections. During the first 5 sections, I will ask participants the questions which they knew before. And in the last section, the participants will have the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes and express their opinion concerning the discussed topics. In each section, the participant can refer to somebody else's points for 1 minute, and you can use this opportunity twice. I hope that the rules are clear and we can start our today's discussion. My first question is, what do you think about the enforcement of the Treaty of Lisbon with respect to the common foreign and security policy? And the first person to answer this question is Spiros from the youth of Syriza. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Lucas. On the international stage, Europe has found itself divided and weak on critical issues. Europe needs a strong and independent common foreign policy capable of meeting global challenges in order to have a strong and equal presence on the international stage. For member states such as Greece, the CEFSP strengthens protection against external threats through the Lisbon Treaty that enhances cooperation within member states. The Treaty of Lisbon is demands finely tuned cooperation in order to be beneficial. All European parties now agree that the Treaty of Lisbon is obsolete. This cooperation, though, must be sought while taking Europe's people's interests in mind. For the left, Europe must play a leading role in the fight for peace, nuclear disarmament, and tackling challenges such as pandemics, climate change, economic development, technological progress, the overconcentration of power and authority by international financial capital, and finally seek common solution referring to refugee migration flows in a humane way. The common European foreign policy must be based on the principles of international law, on the peaceful cooperation of states within the framework of international rules, institutions, and organizations like the UN. Europe has to reject hegemony through the use of violence, unilateral action, nationalism, and protectionism. We seek a world with societies economically, politically, and culturally open to those around our continent throughout the world. Europe also must support human rights and democracy wherever and especially where they're being violated. But we reject outside imposition of regime change under the pretext of defending democracy. Furthermore, Europe must maintain close relationship with Eastern and Southern neighbors, respecting the legitimate rights of third countries. Europe also needs closer relations with the United States based on common values and interests to meet common challenges. The Trump administration has severely tested the institutions of global cooperation as well as relations within our union. Regarding defense policy, we agree towards a common approach. However, we, the left, do not see defense policy as offensive militarization. Steps to deepen the CFSP and the common defense policy must be taken, but in a way that protects the vital interests of all member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next person to answer this question is Kasper from Denmark. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. In regards to European common and security policies, it of course does not work. Since when have you had 27 human beings in a room ever being able to agree on everything together? That is not possible, and it's not possible in the European Union unless we're talking about highly uncontroversial policy changes, which of course we all know if nothing is controversial, then it doesn't really mean anything. And that is the case in the European Union right now. And that's why we need radical change. we need to go for the Foreign Affairs Council to becoming part of the qualified majority voting, as most things are decided in the European Union. Because if we don't, then we are so easy to influence, as it only takes one country to veto a policy change in our foreign policy. And that, of course, cannot continue. If we want a European Union that is strong internationally, that actually says no to Russia, is skeptical towards China, and even the United States, then of course we need a better policy or better policy mechanism of making changes and promoting European values internationally. That is my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to hear Annette about her opinion on this question.
Thank you, Lucas. Common foreign and security policy with the objectives of security and peace is definitely welcomed by us. The European Union should remain a global normative leader, as we have been talking about for the past years, and only together can the Union be as influential to sit at the table with countries as US, China, and even Russia, and to advocate for a rule-based international order. I think that is something that we all across the political spectrum can agree on, and together we can achieve more in globally detrimental causes such as climate change, nuclear control, data regulation, everything that was mentioned before. And we simply are stronger together for external global influence as well as for domestic defense. Regarding the missions of the External Action Service, like Borrell's visit to Moscow, we feel that the Baltic and Nordic views in foreign policy are not executed as well as we'd hoped, but by that I mean they're not fairly taken into account as a minority. What we would most envision in this cooperation is placing the common foreign and security policy questions in the hands of the Parliament more as an institution, and we're glad to see recent statements and actions by this European institution in particular on like Russia and Ukraine and Georgia and even China. And I think my colleagues at Unity Youth share the sentiment of seeing special value in a joint security framework. While we are well aware of the fact that national security is a question of the sovereign, we could only hope for a closer and more centralized cooperation in the future, as the threats that we face, they are more and more common to us as a whole, and therefore only naturally these modern threats require a unified response as well. And we are forever grateful to be part of the NATO security community, and we see that within NATO a more strategically coordinated European cooperation would be detrimental, and especially in combating these unconventional threats. We would be all for in future initiatives like the joint framework on countering hybrid threats, which allow the whole of society approach and engages institutions and private sector alike on different levels across the EU, and cooperation in different fields as well to make up the security guarantee. And initiatives such as PESCO with concrete projects on a voluntary basis is already a step in the right direction, and the Lisbon Treaty already does a lot with the language that member states should assist if a member state is subject to a terrorist attack or a victim to a natural or man-made disaster, which already includes some of these unconventional threats that I mentioned before. Also, interestingly, I can share the idea that was brought up in the youth of the European People's Party convention last fall about introducing an EU Commissioner for International Security and taking steps towards a true security union. And to conclude, if deeper EU cooperation in security issues will only benefit and strengthen NATO, keeping high American interest as well, we should do it. But if there's any minimal chance that EU could parallel NATO functions, it should not be the way forward. For example, we're skeptical about the forever flying around idea of a European army.
Thank you very much. The 3 minutes has passed. And now, last but not least, Oscar from FMS. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I think that the most important change that introduced by the Treaty of Lisbon is the European Union gained legal personality and became a single subject of international relations. Thanks to this, it acts as a bloc with the diplomatic power compatible to such powers as United States or People's Republic of China. The Union, acting as a unified actor in international relations, gets greater strength and a chance to success of negotiations with the global powers that all its member states taken separately. The treaty also introduced the position of the High Representative of Union for foreign affairs and security policy. On the other hand, is a step towards streamlining the EU foreign policy and raising its status in the international area. On the other hand, putting such much power in the field of international relations in the hand of the one person may raise some concerns. As a democratic force, we believe that the European Parliament should have greater control over the EU executive branch. It's a body with the strong democratic legitimacy to make key decisions. In the European Parliament, that best represents the diverse of views around the whole European Union. Although the Treaty of Lisbon extended the power of Parliament in our option to an unsatisfied degree, we should strive to reform the European Union towards great democratization, which will require increasing the powers of the Parliament also in the field of security, foreign policy, and also economic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kasper expressed his willingness to refer to Annette's point, and now you will have 1 minute to say what you want to say.
Thank you, Lucas. And it was regarding Annette's point whether or not the EU should have any military competences that parallels NATO. And in my mind, of course it should. We need a European Union that is strong in all military aspects. When it comes to military operations and military cooperation, you cannot pick and choose where you want to develop in specific alliances. NATO is extremely important for the EU, and of course we should continue to be part of that. But we should also develop our own, which, by the way, NATO themselves also say is a great idea. A fantastic area where NATO and the EU work perfectly in parallel together is in the new JAB policy that has been made by both NATO and the EU that combines our air power much more effectively. And those kind of stuff we need to promote even more. We need a stronger European cooperation in terms of military, while still getting ever closer to NATO as ever before. Because unfortunately, the EU has
Thank
already...
you very much, Kasper. 1 minute is passed. And now, Annette, would you like to comment on this?
I will very shortly, because I don't feel like me and Kasper were really at odds with each other. He also sees the role of NATO, and of course there should be an increased cooperation within the EU, as I said, the whole of society approach, how we can make our private sector and our institutions cooperate, and how we can encourage trust amongst member states to share intelligence, to assure there's critical infrastructure, and all that to make the security union more effective as part of NATO.
Thank you very much. And that was the last answer in the first section of our debate. So we are moving toward the second question, and I think some of you already touched upon this issue. So should we get rid of the unanimity rule in the European Council when it comes to the most sensitive issues? And the other part of this question is very relating to recent events concerning Belarus. So how should the EU respond to yesterday's detention of Roman Protasevich? And the first person to answer is Kasper.
I'll be very short in regards to the unanimity because I already touched upon it. Of course, you should get rid of it. There is no other government or any kind of decision structure where unanimity has been positive. So, of course, we should get rid of it. And the fact that it's there in the first place is ridiculous. In regards to the detention, of course, the EU needs to react to this. Whatever sanctions is possible, because this is such a breach upon human decency and the way you do geopolitics per se. When he was on that plane, he was not on protected by Minsk authority. So of course we should definitely have a harsher response than ever, but we can't when we don't have those measures in the European Union, and that is something we need to work on even more.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to hear Annette on this issue.
Thank you. Well, I will not invent the wheel on the question of European Council, and I can tell you how I feel about it in my mind, being a big Europhile, and it's the same as something that we heard before. A closer security union would mean a closer union by definition, and we need to have a conversation about balancing members' sovereignty and the common functions of the EU. What are we willing to give up, and what can we gain in return? About the unanimity rule, in the Baltics, we're not the biggest fans of foreign policy of France or Germany all the time. They're not as pro-American as we are, but of course we fear losing our possibility to veto big foreign policy and security decisions that are pushed by these bigger states. At the same time, we're frustrated. We're frustrated with the repeating examples of members with currently more populistic governments blocking certain very detrimental decisions and causes, like Hungary blocking EU resolution on Israel-Palestine and other examples. And of course, we cannot be hypocrites and choose when a veto should be allowed and when not. So I agree that standard qualified majority voting would be the best way forward when only a couple of countries would have to join in to block a decision. And in general, it would be a way forward with European democracy and a closer alliance. And honestly, I personally would be all for it. When it comes to responding to the happenings in Belarus yesterday, we have already expelled diplomats from Latvia as a response to Latvian diplomats being expelled from Belarus. And there should be more sanctions. And our foreign minister is, for example, proposing the avoidance of the Belarusian airspace as a start, which already Latvian commercial flights, our Air Baltic airline has already done twice.
Thank you very much. And now, Oscar, the floor is yours.
For example, it's obvious that as a Social Democrats, I'm in favor of keeping the principles of unanimity in the European Council. Is a very good instrument with which we can block the actions of certain states and their particular interests, which are also in fact unfavorable to the entire community. An example of such action is a temporary blocking of the CETA agreement, which is unfavorable for the many European countries. In theory, this agreement was to foster closer ties between European Union and Canada, but in fact, it became another window through which the American corporations could enter the Europe. If the European Union signed this agreement with, for example, from Belarus, counting on trade with this country, they also have to realize that they are not also the cooperation with this country, but it's a cooperation with the Russian Federation, because the Canada is something like Belarus, but for the United States. This mechanism allows us for the protect of such decisions that related to our long-term security, both in economic and military, and allows for the execution of negotiations which are strategically important for the entire community. In the case of a CETA agreement, the Belgians could negotiate better terms for them. The more decisions on such important decisions, the better. Of course, there are decisions where our decision must be taken immediately, but we also have to remember about the agreement, which we can have all the benefits, because every single member of European Union, like people from Denmark, from Greece, from Latvia, from Malta, and from Poland, they are the same people. And when we talk about the Belarus nowadays, as a social democracy, we believe that the Belarus should become a prosper, peacefully democratic, and I have to underline this word, democratic socialist state. We support the Belarusian left, but we have to remember that if the Lukashenko has been replaced by the extremist that is close to neoliberalism and fascism, there is not a good thing, because we have the Ukraine, the retires are particularly likely. It's also worth recalling that the Color Revolution and Ukraine caused the determination of situation of the local left. The Communist Party has been banned, and the Social Democrats and falling victims to attacks by the right-wing militias.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but 3 minutes has passed. And last but not least, Spiros, the floor is yours.
Well, about the unanimity rule, the comprehensive revision of the treaties requires the unanimity of the EU member states, because each and every one of them has a veto power in the European Council. The current balance of power in the European Council reveals the existence of a large majority in favor of maintaining and strengthening the current approach regarding economic governance and foreign policy. Technically speaking, not all European member states have adopted the ESM treaty that has been signed only by the 19 Eurozone member states. We propose, therefore, to overcome this obstacle of the veto within the European Council through an international intergovernmental treaty. The veto power is supposed to be used as a tool for smaller countries or weaker European countries in order to defend their interests. But on the contrary, we have seen quite the opposite throughout the year. Smaller countries use veto power in favor of bigger ones or stronger ones. A solution could be that in order to make a decision, we could have a 70% agreement. We also believe that matters regarding the people of the European Union should be taken in the Euro Parliament, or even to the people themselves through the form of memorandums. Now, about the Belarusian incident. From the few things that we know, because that happened yesterday, KGB agents boarded the plane from Athens. This has to do with our ability to see what is going beneath our noses, but okay, of course I'm going to be opposition political against New Democracy of the EPP, but I would like to express my strong opposition against the Belarusian regime. But I would like to digress in only a small matter. I wouldn't like a dictatorship such as Belarusian government to be treated like the one in Ukraine, with oppositional forces that are hand in hand with the far right and Nazi forces. We strongly agree with sanctions against Belarusian state, but we would not like this country to steer towards neoliberalism and fascism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and that was the last answer in this section. And now we are moving to the third section, and the question is, oh, sorry, Kasper would like to respond to Spiros' answer.
Right, I just wanted Spiros also to mention, like, while I'm not a neoliberal myself, there's a huge difference between being a neoliberal and then a fascist. And Ukraine has evolved into a better democracy than it was before 2014. So we have seen a positive development in Ukraine, and we should not diminish that, even though, of course, there are negative ways where right-wing and sometimes left-wing politicians have been, or political actives have been beating each other down. That should, of course, be condemned and should be worked with. But Ukraine has been moving slowly and surely into a much better society than it was. So we really need to also hype that up more. And in my mind, I cannot see how it can be even worse in Belarus than it is now. The last remaining dictatorship in Europe, and it should be brought down by the people. And it was very close to. So there is definitely something we can do there.
Spiros, would you like to answer?
Yes, I don't quite agree. I don't quite disagree. One thing I'd like to say is I think that other countries in Europe, maybe they're not technically dictatorships, but they are of democracy. But I would like to say that I'm not linking neoliberalism with fascism. But I like to digress and say that there's physical force, and there's physical violence, and there's social violence. But I wouldn't like to to make an impression that I am thinking that they are the same. But regarding Ukraine, they had civil war and there were physical violence from right-wing parties. But what I would like to see in Belarusian state is that they do not go to a civil war and we resolve this crisis peacefully. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you very much. And Oscar expressed his willingness to respond to Kasper's points. So you have 1 minute, Oscar.
Yeah, thank you. I have to ask you a question. That's there's no political pluralism. There's no democracy when we have a country which where the left-wing activists are killed. For example, in Odessa, it's not a good change because you have a strong dictatorship and you try to build a new democratic society without any rules. For example, where's the left wing in the Ukraine? There is no left wing parties because they are strongly in opposition to the government, to the liberal government. So there's not a good way to change anything. If we have to change our public policy, we have to remember about all the political parties and the rights of all people, not only the rebels of the right wing.
Thank you. Kasper, you have 1 minute to respond to that.
I mean, of course, everyone should be included in the democratic process. Speaking as a liberal myself, I just think that the improvements of Ukraine has been much better than, like, I would rather live in Ukraine now than I would have lived in Ukraine in 2013, that's for sure. You've been much more political participation and being able to communicate political ideas. I'm not saying it's perfect. There are violence out there. Of course there is. And that should be addressed. But let's also give Ukraine the credit they deserve to building up a country that is currently in war, as we may not forget.
Thank you very much. Our discussion has become more vibrant, and now we are moving to the third section. So my question now is, what should be the European approach towards Russia? And the first person to answer this question is Oscar from FMS.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the Nord Stream is a project that makes no sense. There is no any economic and political sense for this perspective of the interest of the entire European Union. I think that we need to invest in cheap and environmentally friendly renewable energy that will ensure our independence from the foreign energy supplies. Moreover, in the long term, the investment in the bet is a bet even for the Russia. Russia, by specializing in the export of unprocessed raw materials, is falling into stagnation and regression in the other sectors. Such a model is only good for a handful of oligarchs benefiting from this sector, but it's bad for the Russians and the planet as a whole planet. Instead of the pyramids that do not benefit ordinary people like Nord Stream, we should cooperate with the Russia in the field of research and the benefits for everyone. As Social Democrats, we find Borrell's policy very disappointing because it looks especially bad comparing to the Federica Mogherini, which is also from our political family, whose policy was responsible, multipolar, and aimed at the benefit of the entire European Union and not overseas corporations. As for the visit itself, Borrell should not lecture Russians about the definition of the right-wing extremist Navalny, especially as a political from the country where left-wing activists and artists such as Pazbal Hassel are being arrested and sentenced. It's a shame for me as a European citizen that her of our diplomacy found time to stamp up for far-right extremist activist rights, but he didn't find time to attend the celebration of the victory over fascism in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to hear Annette. You have 3 minutes.
I'm a little disappointed I wasn't given the word first, because I usually introduce myself as coming from the eastern border of the Western world. The facts are that Russia is neither a liberal nor a democratic state, and has been increasingly and outwardly hostile towards the West in the recent decade, and 2008 aggression towards Georgia, 2014 annexation of Crimea, continuous cyber attacks, information manipulation. Then there's also the serious military threat that we saw with the recent buildup of Russian troops on the border of Ukraine. At the time, Youth EPP put out a statement concerning the escalation of the war in East Ukraine, urging a ceasefire. Unity Youth Organization shares the common understanding with our party and with Latvian foreign policy experts in general that Kremlin's aggression is a serious threat to EU security. We understand the frustration that some might have with the seemingly failing current approach of responsiveness instead of proaction, how we choose to condemn and do sanctions after Kremlin's campaigns instead of creating an active dialogue. But we are reluctant to currently see the value in an increased conversation. After all, willingness to compromise and appease an aggressor has not worked in the past. And to be frank, many Latvians were left wondering about what the strategic dialogue that Macron called for with Russia during his visit to Riga back in September really entailed. Coming from Latvia, we both have the memory from the past that is still very alive without the Russian acknowledgement of the Soviet occupation of the Latvian state. And we still see Kremlin's meddling as a threat today. And the main reasons for Borrell's visit was supposedly to give a statement on Navalny. And we definitely agree with the necessity for EU to advocate for human rights and democracy abroad. Here, I don't really agree with Oscar's sentiment, because I feel like an opposition is opposition and democracy should be encouraged. Unity Youth has continuously supported the Russian opposition, especially during the reactivated persecutions, and we condemn the arrest of Navalny. At the same time, it is clear that Borrell's visit was also an attempt at a dialogue with Kremlin, and I personally think it is an ironic statement of its own how Borrell learned about the expulsion of European diplomats at the time of these negotiations. It serves as a comment on the non-feasibility of a current rapprochement. Another issue is, of course, the energy dependency on Russia that enables Kremlin to use oil and gas as tools to exercise both hard and soft power within the EU. There's the clear possibility to manipulate prices, threaten to cut the supply with a hybrid attack, as we saw in Ukraine, and we're against the completion of Nord Stream 2 to decrease Russia's influence, and we welcome the green transition as a great pathway towards a strong, independent, and most importantly, sustainable energy union. To conclude on the general path forward, as far as EU policy towards Russia goes, we would advocate increased EU energy independence, common response to unconventional threats, and definitely no rapprochement as of now.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to hear Spiros. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, on the occasion of the crisis in Ukraine in the past, we were witnessing the resurgence of outdated Cold War Euro-Atlanticism. The current prevailing policy in the EU does not only threaten Europe with a new period of economic recession, with social decline and rise of racism and far-right nationalism. It also threatens the EU in the context of a multidimensional foreign policy. The degradation of the US and Germany in the conflict of Russia. In our view, we must pursue a multidimensional foreign policy. We must pursue the resumption of a meaningful dialogue with Russia while performing sanctions nonetheless, provided that we fully respect the sovereign rights of each member state while maintaining a healthy democracy inside the Russian Federation. Europe must also aim to achieve self-sufficiency in energy within the next decade by boosting green growth and limiting the use of hydrocarbons. Therefore, in the light of the Nord Stream, we are skeptical about this project. For Syriza and for the young left, globalization and post-war global and regional developments require a peaceful, multidimensional European foreign policy from our side, of course, taking in mind our crucial geopolitical position, for instance, about us Greeks. Achieving this aims to strengthen relations with our members, new or traditional partners, regardless of our differences, but with full respect for every country as a member of the EU. Our political home is the EU, of course. Greece should strive to be a bridge between other powers such as Russia or China or countries of the Arab world. All this, of course, without undermining common values that we have set course all these years. Syriza supports the settlement of any conflict zone on the basis of UN Charter, and in particular the UN initiatives for peace and stability in Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen, as well as the implementation of the Minsk decision for peace in Ukraine, the Iran nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and the resumption of Minsk group negotiations on the peaceful settlement of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Also, I would like to suggest that we should use a different policy on the Palestinian issue and be as fast as possible to achieve peace in the region because there's no black or white in this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Kasper.
Thank you very much. What do I think should be the EU policy towards Russia? Well, I just wish there was one. I just wish there was a united vision at all. I mean, Germany, you cannot both sanction Russia to hurt it economically and then hold Russia up economically by buying all their gas. That does not work. You need to decide what you want to do. European Union needs to decide what it wants to do. Now, I am in favor of being hard on Russia, or the Russian government, that is, because after all, Crimea is currently under occupation by Russia. This is no longer the 18th century, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot just have countries grab land wherever they see fit. We have international law for a reason, and this was illegal by all accounts. So, of course, we need to support Ukraine's, ambitions of taking it back, hopefully diplomatically, of course, because that is the best way to do it. But we cannot let it stand that Russia keeps taking and taking and taking and being an adversary in this regard, because we're currently losing this battle, lads. We're currently losing both in the territories of Ukraine, in the Middle East. When it comes to cybersecurity, our elections are getting hacked every time, and we need to do something about it. And the best way to do it is the European Union could unite in one common strategy rather than just sitting on their hands or saying one thing and then doing another. So yeah, straight and narrow, get a vision, and then go for that vision. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kasper. And that was the last answer in this section, but Oscar expressed his willingness to refer to Annette's point. So now you have 1 minute and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is a failure of European diplomacy and a big and a huge victory of the United States, because the conflict is divided more Russia and EU than the United States. The European Union should strive to end all the conflicts and all the wars as soon as possible and initiate mediation between Russia and Ukraine. This, however, requires the European independence from the United States. As long as we do not show the Russia our independence, Russia will see us as a dependent of the United States, which is Russian hostile country. At the end, I want to add something that the 10 years of negotiations are better than 1 day of war.
Thank you. Annette, would you like to respond?
Yes, Oscar is a very, very nice dreamer. I don't think it's realistic to end all conflicts overnight. And I think that it's very regrettable to say that this conflict between EU and Russia is the direct product of EU's inability to create an effective policy. It is the direct consequence of Russian aggression, and we can't be international relation liberals if the other actors are realists. If they are aggressive, then we have to respond accordingly.
Thank you very much. And that was the last answer in this section. Now we are moving towards fourth section. And the question is how to compete with China and the USA in the post-pandemic reality. And the first person to answer is Annette from Unity Youth.
Thank you. I will concentrate maybe a little bit more on China, as it is a little bit more topical. Of course, we see the United States, we see how we can renew and revitalize our relationship with the recent election and the new leadership. So we more see the US as our ally and close ally rather than a competitor. So about China, I would like to open by saying that Unity Youth condones the human rights violations by the People's Republic of China, including the actions towards the Republic of China, Hong Kong, and the Uyghur population. And Youth EPP has recently called for the halt in the ratification of the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, which we all know is currently the case due to sanctions that some Western countries imposed on China and China imposed on European MEPs. Nevertheless, China is the world's biggest, fastest growing economy right now, and the EU's second biggest trade partner. And if you ask me how to compete with China, I say compete with China. The best way forward is to find a way to assure economic cooperation, which includes sooner, better than later passing this comprehensive agreement, in my opinion. Yes, same as Russia, China is not a liberal democracy, but Europe needs to think strategically about ways to promote democracy and human rights abroad, including there. We do not see an agreement with China as an end itself, but rather merely as means for, firstly, remaining competitive and assuring some level of security on a global scale for the European Union, and secondly, furthering the promotion of human rights and democracy abroad. Stronger economic and trade cooperation is inevitable for remaining competitive, and we would invite our European colleagues to look at this cooperation as a strategic necessity and opportunity to positively influence China's domestic, political, and social climate, as well as work on the climate and other global reaching issues. The agreement entails liberalization of China's economy. For us, it would create new job opportunities, but most importantly, allow Europe to remain present and competitive with developments and technology, which I think is so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to hear Oscar. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. In my opinion, the biggest problem affecting all the Europe is the new reality, is the problem of technological independence. The People's Republic of China is fully technologically independent. They have high quality technical stuff, has a well-developed ICT sector, has its own internet browsers and their own social networks, and a very strong biotechnological and pharmaceutical industry. On the other hand, the European Union is full dependent on American corporations and their good or bad will. An example of this is the vaccine dependence of the Union, which almost had to be on the knees, acting corporations to agree to sell vaccines. The default web browser on the mobile phones and the computer is a Google, not our EU, European or more broadly European counterpart. We all use the Facebook platform, not our own European platform. We all watch YouTube videos, not our European type version of YouTube. We should focus on the development of our own technologies, which should become competition for American products. It is the Union that should produce its own vaccines. The Union should guard technological independence, and we should build this enterprise on the basis of public European capital. And all future income from these enterprises should directly contribute to the European budget. Oftentimes, American corporations are trying to initiate many countries against China, which according to purchasing power parity is already the world's largest economic power, because they know that China has learned from the history and they focus at their own development. Our union should also do the same thing like China. because the all habitats can live safer and the union grows stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Kasper.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to move while walking. This is going to be very cinematic indeed. Right. So in regards to when it comes to technology, I don't really mind that we use American products as long as they do it on European terms. And we can definitely make rules what the US IT firm should do, and we do that pretty well already, and of course should do more. But the most important thing is that our data banks, or all the data that is stored about European citizens, are inside European borders. So it goes within regulations. That was just a short remark regarding what Oscar said. In regards to what our thing should be with China, our thing should be, of course, we should cooperate with China when it comes to climate change, especially. But one thing, lads, that we need to be much better at in competing against China, not with China, against China, is in Africa. Right now, the Chinese government owns 32% of all debt that is in China, that is in Africa, sorry. And the next one is the World Bank that only holds 8%. That means that China has incredible soft power in African states. And a recent survey showed where 52,000 Africans for 30 plus countries, I believe, stated that they saw the Chinese model as being the second most attractive model, or 30%, or that was the second highest rated government model to work with, other than Western democracies. And that is a scary thought. If we have entire Africa just come down with the Chinese puppets, and we definitely need to do something about that. And one of the things we should do is be able to grant much better, much quicker loans to Africa. We need to open our borders when it comes to trade. We need to help develop Africa as a continent. We need to strengthen the African Union, which has also already been a good work in that regard, but can be better. And that is definitely where I think the EU should do much more of the focus. I mean, forget about the migrant issue. That is important, but not as important as losing an entire continent to China. And that continent is our neighbor. We need to act right now if we want to win that battle. So that would be my statement of what we need to compete against China with.
Thank you very much. And the last person to answer is Spiros.
Thank you. About USA and China. Well, we do not seek conflict and competition, but cooperation and synergy between parts of the world. We believe that the post-COVID era is a time of change and reorganization. The biggest risk is the financial crisis, in our opinion. But, however, the US under Biden administration, instead of following a recipe for internal devaluation, like that one that we followed in Europe the past decade, is following an expansionary economic policy, and despite their strong stance diplomatically on China, they ultimately seek cooperation and dialogue. We also seek cooperation by defending democracy and the need for the well-being of our people, always in the light of international law and the preservation of human rights across the length and the breadth of the earth. However, we do not agree with using the internal situation of any country as a pretext to serve the interest of business circles or imperialistic conflicts. We believe that China is an emerging economy that theoretically may threaten the American and possibly the European economy in the future, but the biggest controversy now about China is about the South Chinese Sea. More, we think that it's the thing about Taiwan, Tibet, and Uyghurs. We believe that the United States and China should resolve their disputes, as we believe that the backbone of our nations are their own people. Our goal is to achieve, through cooperation of the people, their prosperity, One of the most important issues nowadays about China that arises is the climate change, and we welcome USA efforts through John Kerry, which is an environmental ambassador, to restart the climate dialogue with China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and nobody expressed the willingness to take the floor. So now we are moving towards my last question, which is, how should the EU's relation look like with developing countries? And the first person to answer is Kasper.
Sorry, could you repeat? Somebody just wrote to me.
Sure. The question is, how should the EU's relation look like with developing countries?
How the ES relation should be with developing countries?
The relation of the European Union with...
Oh, well, I already stated in regard to Africa. We need to be the first ones they go to whenever it comes to development. We need to give better loans. We need to open our borders when it comes to trade, and we also need to stop our agricultural subsidies that outcompete African farmers in horrible ways. It is cheaper to buy milk produced in Denmark and then transported to Zimbabwe into a little village, and it's cheaper to buy that milk from the locals than it is to buy their own local farmers' milk. That is crazy. And the only reason why that is possible is because the EU has money after farmers in Europe, which we don't do with any other sector. So that would definitely be a way to start if we want to help developing countries. Take down the tariffs upon the developing countries, include them more into the decision-making process, because this is not just a feel-good humanitarian effort. It is that as well. This is going to really help people. But it's also talked about what do we want the developing countries to be? Do we want them all to be authoritarian states, or do we want them to actually be developing democracies that respect human rights and that has just basic human decency and see the world as we do, or at least a version of that? So that would definitely be my 2 cents in that regard.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to hear Annette. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to flag that I'm not an expert at all in these questions, especially the EU-Africa relationship, but I can give a couple of sentiments that Unity Youth have formed on the issue. And it is important to remain strong supporters of developing nations because we're all interconnected, and we have felt that more and more during the global pandemic as now. We really see the inequality soaring, and we need to remain aware of our privilege living in the developed world. If a problem happens in one place, it will affect all other places, as we have seen not only with the COVID crisis, but with refugee crisis as well. And the stronger and more stable developing countries are, the more they're developing democracies, the more stable we are. On that note, it is important to highlight that the EU is the biggest donor to developing countries around the globe. We provide around 55% of all donations. There's financial aid and material aid that includes food, medicaments, contraceptives, water cleaning machines, and others. And it mostly goes to Africa and Central Asia. So the situation is not as horrible in a competition with China, but of course we need to pay more attention to what is happening in Africa as well. However, it will be very wrong approach for developing nations to look at this issue from the point of view of we're wealthy Europeans and we will give you money, of course. Greater access to European markets for those country products and European investments in those countries probably would do much more good than simply allocating aid and funding. There needs to be a closer mutual economic tie creation, and most importantly, common education programs, as well as peace building, where if invited, EU military can go with missions, as in Mali right now. And since 2020, there are 5 priorities of the EU-Africa relations, which are the green transition and energy access, digital transformation, sustainable growth and jobs, peace, security and governance, and migration and mobility. And I think this is a good track and we should remain on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Spiros, the floor is yours. What do you think about the relation of the EU with developing countries?
Thank you, Lucas. In our view, Europe must renounce its colonial past by totally reconsidering its policy towards developing countries. The European progressive forces are called to stand up against the trade policies that do not enhance sustainable growth. In addition, contrary to its legal foundations, the many members of the EU, like France or Spain, export military equipment in third world countries, which are used in regional conflicts or even conduct military operations in foreign countries, like Mali or Libya formerly. This kind of neo-colonial culture, in our view, is unacceptable. Not sustainable mining, rising prices of commodities, unemployment, lack of sustainable investments regarding to Africa, lack of ownership of means of production are common among citizens of such countries. To make matter worse, they even have to deal with unstable governments and sometimes even violent conflicts. This brutal reality forces many people out of their homes in search for a better future in Europe. It is thus mandatory, in our opinion, for the EU to engage in investment programs and peacekeeping missions in close collaboration with the UN. By subscribing to policies of collaboration, we not only contribute to the fight against poverty, but we also severely limit the flow of refugees coming to Europe, and I'm referring especially about Africa right now. Furthermore, by suggesting the economy of developing countries, we encourage democratic maturity and we win future partners. This is especially important considering the recent efforts of China, among others, just as like the previous speaker said, to influence developing countries and fold them within their sphere of influence. This means that by extending an olive branch to developing countries, Europe does not only win financially, but also geopolitically and also socially in this regarding countries. Another important aspect about developing countries is the imminent change the imminent climate change regarding Africa. EU and the United Nations should join efforts to successfully tackle global warming. It's not only a matter of social welfare and diplomatic relations, but clearly a matter of life and death for our planet. Also, it's quite commonly discussed that climate change could create unsurmountable and unprecedented migration flows, much greater than wars and social conditions have already created about migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kasper would like to say something now.
Well, I was just, I totally agree with Spiros when it comes to helping developing countries transition also a green economy. And then I would have said all that with the migrants, but you ended up with that. So I'll just put a few words more on it, especially if anyone watching this little debate here is right-wing or don't like migrants and think, why are they coming to Europe? Let's stop that. Well, a fantastic way to get them to stop is by making their countries all right to live in. And one of the things that climate change is going to do is going to make it unbearable to live in. So if we don't solve the climate issue, then we're going to have a huge migration issue. So if you don't like migrants, then you should be the biggest supporter of climate action. That was just a little thumbs up for me.
Thank you very much. Spiros, if you want to say something, you have the opportunity.
I would like to comment. I understand what Kasper is saying, but it's not about if I'm being xenophobic. I know Kasper isn't, of course, but many people in the European Union are, and we have to tackle this. The thing is that, first of all, we, the left, we believe that it's a drama for people to be rooted out of their homes, even if it's war or even if it's climate change. Then we think about the burden, as the right wing or other political parties may say. But I would like to digress and say that in 2015, we, the Greek government of Syriza, showed the way and paved the way for a common migrational policy in the Europe that we haven't seen yet from the right-center parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And going back to the question about the EU's relation with developing countries, I would like to give the floor to Oscar, and you have 3 minutes to answer the question.
At first, I have to say that I have nothing to add about the migration crisis because you said all about this. But the European Union should treat the developing countries not as a field of expansion of the European corporations and their interests, not as the countries whose citizens can be exploited at will, because the times of colonization are over, and yet colonial thinking towards poorer countries still has a place in the minds of the many European politicians. I think it's from every single political group. As a union, we should allow poorer countries to develop, just allow them to develop. In the 70s, the United Nations adopted a document, the document which is called New International Economic Order, which is a kind of guide for undeveloped countries, but what is actually in it? The main postulates of the new international economic order are the developing countries have the right to regulate and control the activities of international corporations operating in the country. Developing countries must be free to nationalize or expropriate foreign assets on terms favorable to them. Developing countries must be free to form unions of producers of key commodities. All other countries must recognize this law and do not take any economic, military, or political restrictions. International trade should be based on the need to ensure stability, equality, and profitability in the raw material prices, general non-reciprocal and non-discriminatory tariff preferences, as well as technology transfers to developing countries. We should also provide economic and technical assistance without any obligations. And last, developed countries should increase their imports of industrial products and other products from the developing countries to help them. Of course, many European countries may lose out in the short term, but in the long term, we will gain many trading partners. I will underline this partners. With which we can trade, and they work together to promote technological development and fight poverty all over the world, on the globe, not point-based scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was the last answer in the fifth section. And now we are moving to the last section. And now you have 3 minutes to say anything concerning the discussed topics, which is European Common Foreign Policy. The first person to answer is Spiros from the youth of Syriza.
Yeah, I would like to express my skepticism about the last question, as that about the last four. I don't think that we have huge grievances about the matters, about the relation that the European Union has with developing countries. I would like to express my skepticism about waging war in our close region, close to Greece, which is the Mediterranean, the Gaza district, the Gaza Strip, Syria, Libya. I quite understand that we have a different diplomatic relation with Russia. I quite understand that, but I do not see how we are a tail of a transatlantic alliance that wages war and we do not nothing about it. And I would like to ask all our colleagues right now how we see our cooperation with developing countries like Palestine or like Syria or like any of them in a form of peaceful negotiation and not condemning them from being settled and throwing rockets. I don't know. I condemn Hamas. I really do. But I do not see how we, the European Union, can be in a position to say that we have done our best while waging war in all those countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Kasper.
Thank you very much. I've already said the most important thing before: get rid of the unanimity rule. If we really want to do anything with the European Union, we also have to do it externally. And the only way to do it externally is if we can actually get action. And the way to get action is by using the qualified majority system that is already used, because we've been shown it works. So that would be my highest. If you take anything away from this debate, then it is that. Get that changed as fast as possible. Get your politicians to agree, because after all, it is the member states who change the treaties. And the faster we can do that, the better. Because otherwise, we're not going to be able to tackle our future security risks that there are. Let's all be glad and thankful that the United States has gotten a new president that actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to security policies and may not be in the pocket of the Russians. And I really, really hope that the EU and the United States are going to have a much better relationship than they had in the past. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we got touched upon most issues. I have to go now because I have a meeting, but thank you so much for the invitation. It's been really fun, especially against you guys as my colleagues there. It was really good, and have a good time. All right, love each other. Remember that.
Thank you very much, Kasper. We'll continue with our discussion. We have still 2 people left, and now I will give the floor to Oscar. You have 3 minutes, and you can say whatever you want.
I think that I have nothing special to add, but I think we, as a European Union, we must act for the peace and treat countries outside Europe as the partners. We have to give up the Western certain perspective. We also need to support each other internationally in European Union, because we are because we are one community and not a set of countries from which each one is doing what they want. As I said about the war, it's not a simple thing when we talk about Ukraine and about Belarus. We cannot look at this point. Okay, here we have a dictatorship, and we need to strike it. Yes, we need to strike it to destroy, to provide a full democracy and so on. But we have to remember about the all kinds of polity which can make this democracy in this countries. Because let's look at the Near East, when the European Union and the United States destroyed the dictatorship, the socialist dictatorship, and now in these countries we have Islamic radical dictatorship. I don't think this is the best way to prepare a full democracy, all the liberal values, and maybe all the social democratic values. We need to remember that it's not as simple as we can see it. I also think it's not the simple one. We cannot say that Tikhanovskaya is good, or the Lukashenko is good, or the Putin is good, or the Navalny is good. It's not so simple as we can look at the first time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last answer of this debate, the floor goes to Annette.
Thank you. I think as a representative of the Youth EPP, you have heard the least number of controversial statements from me today. But to kind of give a little summary, I was happy to see that from all across the political spectrum, young people seem to be very all for the idea of a more closer foreign policy and security union. And I think that we're on the right path, and we should continue with becoming closer and closer, and therefore more efficient in responding to global crisis and challenges. as well as supporting the development of democratic regimes abroad, which includes Belarus and Ukraine, and in their fight against also Russian influence in these states. And if we can't say that Navalny is good or Putin is good, we can definitely say that Putin is bad, and he has proven it in practice. So we need to be very mindful when we speak about these things, and not to try to copy these kind of our own understandings of what politics is in countries where there is basically no democracy and no human rights, to even begin figuring out what type of political placement on the compass they will be in the future. So we need to support the opposition in these states just for the sake of saving democracy, and then in the long term, of course, to make it, help it, support it flourish and become a full realized democracy, hopefully a liberal democracy where human rights are respected and there's no discrimination against anyone. So thank you everyone for such an engaging debate. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you very much, and that was the last answer in today's debate. I hope that you enjoyed the discussion and the audience also appreciates this. See you, have a good night.